Welcome to the Music Wide Open podcast
The place for an honest and thought-provoking conversation
about music,
business,
life,
technology,
and the future,
for curious music enthusiasts.
and musicians seeking personal growth. I'm Ingolf Wunder.
And I am Paulina Wunder. Natural music making and musicality are directly connected. Even more so, they are interchangeable. When one is asked, what does it mean to be musical? One usually comes up with some expressions like being sensitive to music, having talent, artistic expression, or simply being able to play a musical instrument or to sing, or anything else that, let's face it, sounds murky. Because as much as it's correct, what does it mean to be sensitive to music? What does it mean to have talent or artistic expression? Is a person who goes to music school or music university automatically musical just because he or she practices on a daily basis or has a renowned teacher or a diploma from a renowned institution? Is a musician who becomes famous unquestionably musical? Does the musicality grow along the publicity? Or is it predefined by the laws of nature but understood by few? This is the subject I would like to talk about today. What does it mean to play naturally?
Well, that's a big subject, but I think the most important in music. Natural music making, by the way, this is a term I use whenever I speak about interpretation of music and how it should be done. And I think it's a good word because the natural part is very important. So it consists of subtle nuances in timing, dynamics, and phrasing, so how you play music, that make the personal expression of music. And it's sort of a natural code of balance and ratios that determine whether a thing is natural or unnatural. In a way, it's bringing a piece of music to life in a human way. And if you do it right, it resonates with the emotions and the intentions that the composer had when he wrote the piece of music. Here it's very important to know that, I know you heard that so often, but music consists of two layers, more than that, but two main layers. The compositional layer and the performance layer. The compositional layer is the structure of music, the harmonics, the melodies. The composer chooses these, right, in order to represent something that he wants to put in music, like an emotion or an experience or whatever. So that's the compositional layer. And then the performance layer is the layer through which any piece of music comes to our brains. And in that performance layer, the natural music lies. It has everything in it, like breathing, like, for example, how natural you breathe when you begin a phrase, or if you wait enough or too little or too much in front of chords that are important, or when the composition has a certain structure, and for example in the structure there are 4 bars that lead to the climax, and the interpreter in the performance layer makes something that doesn't lead in these 4 bars naturally to the climax. And then we come to rubato. Of course, I will not go into this now because we might make a separate episode about rubato already, but this is connected as well with this. Rubato is basically the natural balance to adjust tempo, like to speed up and slow down.
Let's maybe make a comparison.
A good comparison of this is like sitting in a taxi where a bad taxi driver is driving you. So if somebody brakes, accelerates, until your stomach gets bad, that's sort of what I mean in terms of the balance of tempo and how to adjust the rubato so that doesn't happen, that it's naturally, that you're driven nicely, that you accelerate in the right tempo at the right time and brakes when it needs to be slower and stuff like this. So one has to play like a good taxi driver drives, not like a bad one. So all these things together make natural music making or make a piece of music played naturally. And this is what I mean with this term.
This all sounds very logical, and I believe to other people as well. But there's one thing, how to determine which musician actually understands that and one hears that in their music.
Well, it's all about awareness, really. I know this term comes often, but it's really so important, because once you get sensitive to these kind of ratios, to this balance, to the speech in the music, then you cannot not listen to it. And it's like most of the people speak, right? I mean, we all learn to speak a language, and in good actors, for example, you have exactly the same things. You have how they speak, how they bring a message, how they structure the thing, and then we say, wow, he's a good actor, or wow, he speaks good. And if you're aware of these musical details, you hear that too. And frankly speaking, you cannot listen anymore to somebody who doesn't play natural.
Unless someone copies.
Well, I believe personally that if you are aware of these principles, let's call it, or this code of natural music making, then you spot copies. Because it's very, very hard to copy.
That's true.
Something natural, because you might succeed in a couple of bars, but then there will be one bar where you will just forget to copy well, and that will show the educated listener that it's not natural.
That's true. And well, it's okay when you're a child and you learn at first everything by copying, right? That's the way it is. And
yes.
Also it's a healthy motivation for a child, I believe.
Well, this is how we learn. You need to copy at first.
But once you have your awareness, your artistic awareness in place, you should rather sing, not copy, unless you make a fabulous copy. But then it means it's not a copy; it's you.
Absolutely, but here we have to separate things, because we are speaking about I believe a child who plays music plays like it is. Of course, I'm not talking about some machine robots, 5-year-olds that are trained to play Flight of the Bumblebee or something that you shouldn't play in that age anyway.
Well, it's a competitive world.
Yeah, but but this might be already a copy, and this cannot be the child. It's just trained in and hit into the child. But if a child naturally, again, goes to music, like through folk music or through simple stuff, then the kid sings like it is, sometimes wrong, sometimes, but it has it doesn't think, it comes out of the subconscious somehow. Yes. And a good teacher will preserve that. Like a good teacher will tell the child to to adhere to a certain structure or something that music needs to have, but will allow it to do it in their own natural way. And so that would be the ideal thing, to keep the child natural, so to speak.
That's true. But look, we are both aware of that there are teachers who don't bother actually with explaining to a student why he or she should play a certain phrase this or the other way. Instead, when a student asks, why should I play this way, they rather say, the teachers, some teachers, because I say so. And obviously the students who hear such an answer won't ask again. They will just execute without understanding what they are doing.
That's correct.
It's
unfortunately,
fake.
way too many.
This is where it starts.
Exactly. I mean, this will also come probably many times in the course of this podcast, but I put to that the 80-20 rule, or maybe even 90-10, that 8 out of 10 people or 9 out of 10 people just don't have enough clue to even teach or to even understand it.
Well, no,
and they still do.
I think some teachers might argue that some students are simply stupid and this is the only way how one can pass on any kind of knowledge. But then I'm asking, what such a student is doing at the university or music school.
Well, this
or if it's a private course, why a teacher agrees to take such a student.
Well, that's exactly the question. It's a moral question in a way, because if the teacher is aware of the fact that he still does it, it makes him a businessman, no teacher.
True.
And if the teacher is not aware of the things, then he shouldn't be a teacher on that level. So there's really no good way.
Talking about that, it maybe is not directly connected with the essence of this, what we are talking about, but it fits here. I will say something that will be slightly controversial for these people who are not aware of it. But before I say it, I have to underline that it's a fact. Not my assumption, but a fact. There is an issue with music universities because in some cases, I would even say many cases, but let's stick to some cases, it's not the talent or musicality that determines whether a student gets accepted or not, or even whether he or she passes the final exams and gets a diploma, but it's the financial status of the student. You have money, you get it. Your skills are secondary. Of course, one could say, from a business point of view, it's good if an institution is profitable, right? Financial sustainability is important, and if the resources are used effectively, it can lead to the institution's growth, which is also important. But that's not a question of business. This is exactly what you said. This is a question of ethics, of morals.
Yeah, and it's exactly this what we also touched upon and will touch upon many times, is about this higher spirit that should be there in music. I mean, you know, music was before the artist became what it is, right? It was closely linked to God, to religion or something. Not whether you believe in God or religion is another story, and it's not connected to that. But the people, Bach, etc., they made music for a higher purpose. And this is nowadays challenge, among others, that this should still be the reason why we do music, and it's in the rarest cases that it is so. And but you see, when you said universities, that triggered immediately, like in the in the times Rubinstein went to Berlin or something at the university or Hochschule, whatever it was called back then. There was just different standards, and I think it's closely linked to this what I call now natural music making, because simply not natural music making people were not accepted. Period. Like there were much higher standards. You know, this example that you know already very well, because I mention it often, is when De Bachmann was playing in Vienna at the Musikverein, and Leschetizky with one of his students went to the Bachmann's concert, and the next day the student came to Leschetizky playing Ballade No. 1 by Chopin, which the Bachmann played the night before, and the student supposedly played
in concert.
In concert, yes, and the student played supposedly very well for Leschetizky, but despite him playing very well, Leschetizky went to the student and just clapped him or hit him in the face or whatever you did back then, and said, you played exactly like the Bachmann did yesterday, and that's not acceptable. I mean, that's the standard I'm talking about. It's like, because it probably wasn't natural, I'm just assuming here, but if you copy something, as you said, or you asked, the copy isn't you. So, these were the standards.
Yes, but, that is correct, and I fully agree. And I also believe that if one is an artist, one should have his own vision. But at the same time, one can't forget one thing. Even well-established musicians who are making an international career, or even those ones whose names are big in the classical music business, between the lines, without even being fully aware of it, I feel, admit they are copying. If I read once in a while, and that has happened already several times, that, for example, a world-famous opera singer, as much as an opera singer can be famous these days, of course, or a pianist that makes a decent career, says publicly something like, I'll be learning now this or that opera or this or that piano sonata, and I've already started to listen to the recordings that are available on the market. Sorry, nobody will tell me that they are doing that in order to come to a conclusion. Oh, this way it has been already interpreted, so I will do it differently. For me, it rather means I'm selecting the parts I like and I will attempt to copy them. Let's face it. Someone might say they probably simply want to learn from the best. Well, then I will ask, what are they doing on big stages, having all the perks of this artistic life, and they are not still in school? Exactly. If you know, people, I mean, if you do it, if you copy, at least don't say it. But obviously, these people don't see anything wrong with it.
And it's because the market allows it. And this is because this code of natural music making, what I'm talking about, I believe it is an actual code, just hasn't been studied enough yet. We, in fact, did the first study into that subject, and a successful one.
Yeah.
But it has to be studied more. That's and true. In more genres and stuff. But I believe it's just a code that is too complex yet to understand, really. We feel it with our gut, those that have the receptors. But it is a code. And if you copy, like to come to this example, that people, of course, people do that with recordings, because nowadays, you have to imagine in the 19th century, it wasn't available simply. People had to travel to another country to get an advice for one particular bar or one crescendo or something, because there was no recording of that master. He had to actually tell you how to do it, for you to. But if you learn it from a master that way, if the master is aware of these codes, which they were back then, without even knowing that they are codes, then you have learned it in your natural way and not by copying. While if you listen to a recording of somebody, nowadays even an edited one where it might not be natural in the first place, and you copy this bar and that bar from another recording and this bar from another recording, it's exactly what people do. And then it's even more unnatural, because even if you copy sections from great master and combine it with another master's next two bars, it will not be natural within itself, because these are two intentions.
That's true. And as I said already, I believe as an artist, you have to have your own vision. Yes or no?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Ideally.
Otherwise, you're not an artist. Yes or no?
Yes, absolutely.
And I believe if you're not an artist in that case, then you're simply a transition between a musician and AI. I know it sounds maybe harsh, but isn't that a reality?
It is the reality, but of course here we have to, for the listeners, we have to be a bit less black. I mean, it has to be done black and white like this for people to understand and wake up.
This is why I'm doing it.
Exactly. But of course there are layers, right? Some people might do some things very well because some things fit to their character, and they maybe don't think that much, and maybe it is natural, and other things that the business maybe forces them to do or whatever, or they have to do it because to advance somewhere or to make somebody happy that will then re-invite them or whatever. They do something that they shouldn't do in the first place, and the old masters would have, for example, advised against doing it, but they do it anyway, and then they copy something, and then they do it wrong, but the critics don't realize, because they have also no clue about that code, so they get good reviews.
Not everybody.
Of course, on average, absolutely right. There's just too little people that have that
real understanding and time
but
to make an honest judgment.
But definitely, it's weight. This is what we are talking about. Is weight.
Okay, but please allow me to interrupt here. People judge all the time, and coming back to my example of the artists who are copying and are admitting it. Actually, when I read something like that in an interview or on social media, and out of curiosity, I scroll down the comments, no one actually points out, hey, wait a second, you're preparing your interpretations by listening to records of others? And then one is surprised, because sometimes people are surprised, when some young musicians during competitions or whatever are trying to copy an interpretation of a, let's say, past prize winner. They get the example from the top.
Yeah. But you know, this is so right what you say, and it's time that people wake up, because imagine we are playing. I say in the classical music, although I started because of you to compose, so I'm also a composer now. But we in classical music as interpreters play music that is played for the last 300 years all over again. So the composition layer is always the same, known, and in many cases really already well deciphered, let's say. So not much to discover. There is always something to discover, but not much. And the interpretational layer, so the performance layer, is the one that is actually the most important in classical music, of old music, right? And if people copy that as well, then there's nothing left.
That's why I say it's a natural transition between a musician and an AI. Something in between.
And it's also a recipe that just leads to decline of that art form, which, let's face it, it does in society. It's not as important anymore as it was 50 years ago. But it's because of that. Because you basically strip everything that is important away. And you just rinse, I mean, how is it? Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Like you always, there's nothing new.
There are very many talented musical people out there. This is a fact.
Absolutely.
Right? And some people might think, what's the problem? Everything is good, right? There are so many great artists around. Well, yes or no? Because again, what does it mean to be great?
Exactly.
It's easier to be, let's put it in the quotation marks, great when one either gets popular or old or both.
Exactly.
But what does it mean?
Well, to be great, exactly that's what I mean in this classical interpretation industry. It comes down to natural music making, period. Because it is this skill, this art, this personal expression that allows the music to speak to the listener on a profound emotional level. I know if the listener is not necessarily aware of that, but it's not the listener's fault, because let's put it this way, if the listener would be exposed to both things, she would feel it. And the best example is in competitions. If somebody is among the interpreters that has it versus the one that doesn't have it, usually people respond. The public, right? Yeah. It's not always the public's favorite that wins, as we know.
That's true.
but they do feel it in direct comparison.
That's true.
But in a concert stage where you just
one-on-one,
you get one in front of you and he plays for you, you will just not have a comparison as a normal listener, right? I mean,
there's marketing on top, which makes you automatically, subconsciously, liking it better than most of the time.
Exactly. That's why it's so...
That's why you can become great overnight.
Yes.
Right.
So, yeah.
You know, maybe there's something to do with the fact that we are not so much in tune with nature. We are busy. We are spammed with so much stuff, with superficial and fake things. Spammed with an enormous amount of stimuli. Sensory overload. How many people ask themselves a question, why do I like what I like? And are really honest with themselves?
Very few. Yes, and not being in tune with nature, you mentioned, has to do that this natural music making, that's why we call it natural, is absolutely comparable with patterns and principles of life. I mean, if you think about the Fibonacci sequence, tree branches, shells, flower petals, and all this stuff.
The way how the leaves move.
Exactly. Natural music making has these patterns too, and it's in a sense harmony and aesthetic pleasure. Musical composition mirror these patterns as well. So, and it's. I know it's a deep subject, but it's important to open it because once one is aware of these sequences, one sees them everywhere. I mean,
that is true.
Look at the, buildings. Look at, as you said, trees and all the things. How there's a certain, music flow, real music composition and performance comes out of us, out of our systems, which are, self-organizing. systems, like the universe, like everything. So there are these
frequencies,
codes. Absolutely.
and
Well, music is, of course,
the time.
Yeah, everything. Of course, nature also strives for harmony and balance. Always does. And music, natural music making also. So climaxes, composer's intention, moods, etc. It has to be in balance with everything. And if you don't have that, it's not in balance. Even if as you said, nowadays the whole world seems to be out of balance, and people don't seem to notice. And some people do, but many people don't.
But look, due to this overstimulation in life, also in music, actually, in the music business, overstimulation, stress, and so on, people don't even breathe naturally or in a healthy way.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the role of silence, for example, in space. In nature, silence and space are not just there. They have an active role. And in music, that's why I called it breathing up when I explained it. Pauses, rests, timing variations, rubato. These are the spacing between notes. This is where the balance is coming from. And once you get aware of these things, you cannot look away anymore.
That's true. We definitely should ask ourselves a question: why do I like something? Do I like something? Do I dislike something, and why? More often. And sometimes I have an impression that many people adjust their explanation of how they feel about this or the other interpretation after they know the name or the face of the person who plays. I miss blind listening tests.
Well, like they did in the competitions in the old times.
In some, yes. I believe in an ideal world, and that should be a requirement for everyone who wants to be, I don't know, for example, a jury member or a music journalist or any kind of a decision-making person who claims that the most important is music. At least that would be honest. Whatever they would come up with in such a blind listening test, at least one would know their standards and what they mean.
Absolutely, but it takes a lot of balls to do that.
That's true. And self-confidence.
And I mentioned our research in natural music making, and we in fact did that and had world-renowned experts doing it, and this is amazing. But I want to also go to the taste thing, because it's very important. This natural music making code is taste independent. The wine example that you once came up with, and that I used then in the TEDx talk as well, is a good one also for music. It's like if you're an experienced wine drinker, or not in an alcoholic sense, but in a taste sense, or a sommelier or something, then you come to a point where you can really disentangle taste from quality. Like you can for example say, well, this is a well-rounded super wine with with depth, with a great finish, etc. Whatever terms. I'm not the greatest sommelier. I'm not a sommelier at all, but I know a little bit. And you can explain the stuff to explain the quality, while at the same time you can say, but it's a Chardonnay, and I really don't like Chardonnays.
That's true, yes.
And that's okay. It's the same with music. If you know these. Or if you get, it's not even knowing it, if you feel these codes, then then you can disentangle and saying, yeah, I wouldn't play it this way, I don't like that composer or whatever, these harmonics or melodies, don't touch me, but it's nicely done.
Yeah, or it's nicely done, but I don't like this face.
But yeah.
This is... Well, yeah, some people called it, in fact, in the past, good taste. And exactly this is the thing, that now no one really knows what it means. Okay, one could say, knowing when to play with simplicity, or not overplaying, or not showing off when it's unnecessary, right?
But like always, people, destroy this stuff, because that has been, what I mean is by this empty phrasing people do. It was right what you say in the when the classical music had this hype in the 50s or 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. They said all the right things, and since then people just repeat the old things while losing the actual value of the terms.
Yeah, the terms are right, but how many people really feel these nuances?
Exactly, one would have to really explain what it means.
Exactly,
and you
in
never
detail.
get, like, you very, very rarely get to a point where you can actually sit down with somebody and really analyze, okay, you said that, but what does it mean? Show me an example, or explain what it means really in terms of notes, timing, in terms of, then you really understand.
People really lose their confidence then.
Yeah.
And of course, on top of that, we're talking here about these nuances. There are also several groups who will interpret these nuances in a different way.
Absolutely. And this is where the taste comes in, because I think at some point, because also it depends, like in everything, like if you take this natural music making code, let's say, and if you go, this code will also have several layers, I'm sure about it. And once you go very deep, you might come to a point where you say, yeah, that's really taste. Because the nature of this code that I'm talking about is like that there are lots of rights. There is not one right way to play. Absolutely not. There is loads of rights.
As in nature.
And there's loads of wrong ways to play. But at some point you might say, yeah, this is maybe slightly more natural than this one, but both are still under the threshold or over the threshold of what it needs to be natural or unnatural, you see.
But it should be explained in order to be as well pass on to next generations.
Exactly, especially this is in classical music as it's now. I mean, that should be the topic number one. I have no idea why it's not, because this is
I never read anything of this kind, unfortunately.
Because that's the only thing we have, Like if everybody would, like I did now, due to you, I stressed it always, because I wouldn't have started without you, because I was also in the system. That's why. If you don't compose, then you that's all you have. There's nothing else that we can differentiate ourselves with, because the socks or the socks or the clothes that we wear, that is now used to differentiate a pianist from another or a musician from another. It's not music, and it's not what we should do. So the interpretation or the code behind the interpretation is the only thing we have, unless you start composing and you invent your own composing layer.
And on top of that, you start to understand more about music.
Exactly. But if you do compose, you see what I mean, then you change the rules, because then you can say,
true, that's true.
I wanted to depict this and this and this, and if somebody can criticize and say I don't like it, and it's fine if he doesn't like, or she doesn't like what you write. But if you make up a story, sort of, you have the vision, and you can say, no, here's the climax, here's this, here should be weighted, here should be the pause, here should be this, because you invented. But once you have the set composition layer, like we all do, then interpretation is the only thing we have.
Yes, and therefore one shouldn't copy it from another person.
Absolutely not.
Okay, when is then an interpretation a copy, and when does it come from musician's own heart and mind?
Well, I think when the music really originates from the musician's heart, I mean, it's a cheesy way to put it, but it is really this personal expression I mentioned before that reflect the unique perspective and emotional response, because of course we as interpreters have to sort of intuitively feel where the composer wanted to go with his music, although we don't know always 100% how he felt, because we can't talk to the composer if he's that long. But still, once that's done with your own understanding of emotion, then it's natural. You see, I don't know if that makes any sense, because
not influenced by
some artificial copy, and every copy is artificial, because it's not you. It's not, and you can copy at the beginning, because you need to learn, as you said, you need to learn with a copy.
Like children.
But at some point, you need to understand what it is that you copy and improve it with your own emotional expression. And if that's not happening, it stays a copy, and it's not natural. Never will be. The most important thing is that it cannot be calculated. It has to come from within, from maybe even your subconscious. I don't know if that's correct, because of course consciousness also is very important.
Creativity.
The creativity in the prefrontal cortex. So
Yes.
this is very important, but it has to be like it has to be
from
internalized.
your program, in
Yes,
a way.
but internalized that much that you don't do it intentionally, that it just happens.
Yeah. Still with all the effort that a musician takes to learn the
That's
score,
before.
obviously.
That's
yes.
before, yes.
Absolutely.
I'm talking about the stage after.
Is it possible that the same person, from a natural music-making musician, after a certain events in his life, becomes a less natural musician, or the other way around? Can musicality change, or only the way of expression can? So exciting versus boring?
Well, I think the short answer is no.
So it cannot change.
It cannot change, but the but is it can change if a person is sort of not true to begin with. Like I will have to give some information what I mean. Like if a person has a psychological or physical issue, or
goes through a difficult time.
Yes, for example, if you have a depression or whatever, something like this. Or for example, if you have a, I don't know, if you're super autistic or something like that, or if you can just, if you're at the end of the day a machine, which many humans are, then a robotic machine, and somebody for example with a natural sense trains you, and you play then sort of natural, but you don't feel much in the first place, so you just...
And you cannot reproduce this knowledge or habits in another
later,
piece, for example.
Or later, when
Yes.
that person is not around anymore or something like this, then it can happen that it then all of a sudden goes... But even in such a case, I would say, if you really listen deep into that playing, by deep I also mean not only a couple of pieces, but really, I don't know, 50, 100 pieces of that person, then even then you would get hints and small things that would tell you, probably not natural, even if it's hard to spot. So only in such extreme cases I think it's possible to really switch from natural to unnatural, but basically not. Basically it's not possible.
And how to avoid confusion? What's natural music making and what's just an expression? So this is what I said, exciting or boring, because these are two different things and can be confused.
Well, generally not every type of music fits to one's own taste as an interpreter, because one has certain own presets in terms of body, finger moves and stuff that one prefers versus stuff that one doesn't prefer, and therefore in some cases a very musical, natural music making person, so to speak, can also play something boring or not necessarily fitting in some way, because of these factors. But of course, when I say fitting, I'm fully aware that we have in society certain rules, unwritten rules of how specific music has to be played or what it should contain, etc. So we are going here very deep in a deep subject, but there are certain... But even then, even if somebody then plays boring, the code of natural music making is still there, and you can still spot if somebody is a natural boring player or a natural exciting player.
Yeah. Or if he's natural in the first place.
Yeah, or in that case, if he's an unnatural boring player or unnatural exciting player. That's absolutely correct.
What I sometimes observe, and actually it continues since childhood, when I see two musicians, and they don't have to be from the same field of music or kind of music, when they both have this deeper understanding of music, shall we say organic, and they listen to something together or listen to the other ones playing or singing, there are these, it's usually a split second of a silent communication, one look. It's super quick, it's very intense. There is no spoken word, but it says, that's it, you're my person. There's an incredible energy created in that 1 second. It's instant. On the other hand, when this happens, and there is also a third musician present who is not on the same wavelength, let's call it a wavelength. It's a funny situation to observe because you see the two communicated and the third one doesn't even realize anything, but he's the first one to say nice or whatever, while the other two stay speechless. It is just my private observation that I believe it slightly fits to this whole subject of natural music making.
That's absolutely true. I mean, I think, that triggers another thing, because as we don't know really much about this reality, or we don't know much how basic things work, we absolutely don't know how music really works. Why I'm saying that is that I know, and I have no idea how that's possible. But for example, if a musician breathes before a phrase that he will play, I know after the breath whether the phrase will be working or not. He hasn't played yet, but it's possible, and I have no idea how. It must be some kind of
energy,
quantum entanglement or whatever it's called, because that works. This works with the students. Also, if you have masterclass, if I have masterclasses, for example, when the person understood it, not your taste or something, just when, because that's important. We have to hear disentangle. If a student plays like you feel it, and you feeling good because he plays like you want it to be played. And that's not what I mean. I mean that if it will be natural, it's determined.
Even if it surprises you.
Exactly, but it's determined before he plays, and I have no idea how this works, but it works.
Why is this whole natural music making relevant?
The concept of natural music making isn't about imposing a single standard or something I want to hear or taste, but rather encouraging a deeper, more personal connection to music, listener and player. And so my goal with this is not to impose anything of what I think is right, because I said before that there are loads of right ways and loads of wrong ways. So no matter what I think is good or bad. So my goal is just to encourage with this, to think about it, and maybe due to that make people emphasize personal musical expression more, because I think it's very, very, very needed, especially for this classical music world. And so that musicians interpret music in their own natural way, and that the listener gets aware of these things, and maybe next time they come to a concert, think about whether something is in balance or whether something is natural. And it's always in such a journey. You see a couple of breadcrumbs, you follow them, and then a whole new world is being opened, and you just want to know more about it. And this is not only beautiful for one's own development, but it will give so much more pleasure when one listens to music.